Hello everyone, this is Jason from Iron Mission. Thank you so much for being here. Joanna's got the week off, but in today's video, I wanted to talk about something I hear a lot, especially over the years, and even in our tiny little channel, I've heard it quite a bit, and that is, Harleys are so expensive. And what I often find is people who say that actually aren't comparing Harley-Davidson motorcycles to other motorcycles that are in the same class. It's really easy to say, oh, I looked at a Harley Street Glide and my gosh, that's so expensive compared to a Yamaha MT-07. It's not the same bike. It's not even close. And so what I wanted to do today is take a look at 3 different motorcycles that Harleys actually sell and look at other bikes in the class that Harley is competing in. And we're going to determine whether or not Harleys are really that much more expensive or if they're more expensive at all. Hope you enjoy the video. Appreciate you being here. All right, so what we're going to do is we're actually going to look at 3 different classes that Harley actually sells in. We're going to look at the baggers. We're going to compare the Street Glide to the Indian Chieftain to the Goldwing. I'm not talking about the Goldwing with the Tour Pack. I'm talking about the Goldwing that's a little bit stripped down. So we're going to look at those 3. Then we're going to look at the Harley Heritage Softail Classic compared to the Indian Super Chief Limited. Honda really doesn't even compete in this part of the market, so we don't really have a comparison there. And in fact, when I looked at other motorcycle manufacturers like Yamaha and Kawasaki, they don't really have anything comparable to those particular motorcycles as well. Then we're going to look at the Harley-Davidson Nightster versus the Indian Scout Bobber. And here Honda does have something to compete, and that is the Rebel 1100. And we're going to break it down. We're going to look at their features, not too super in depth, but we're going to look at what these bikes are actually offering for the price and see, okay, is Harley really that much more expensive? All right, so let's go ahead and take a look at these more budget-minded entry-level motorcycles. The first one being the Honda Rebel 1100. These bikes have a pretty solid reputation. In fact, the very first motorcycle I actually learned on was my dad's Honda Shadow way back in the early 1990s. And so the Honda Rebel 1100, also known as a 67 cubic inch engine, MSRP is right around $9,600. And for that, you're getting a 27.5 inch seat, a 3.6 gallon gas tank, 81 horsepower, 68 foot-pounds of torque, weighs about 487 pounds, and it has a nice 5-inch TFT screen. Now, here's the other thing we have to consider. It's not just the initial price, and I think this is where a lot of people go wrong. They think, okay, you know what? I'm going to look at the MSRPs, and therefore I'm going to make a decision. The other thing that you have to consider is what is the resale going to be like in 2 or 3 years as well, because it's actually that difference. That's what you're actually paying. And for these entry-level bikes especially, most people are not keeping these longer than a couple years. They get used to riding and then they move on to something a little bit larger, more comfortable. Just going on Facebook Marketplace. Now I did look in my area, and that area is the Chicagoland area, so your area might be a little bit different, but the resale values for these motorcycles are going right around $7,000 to $8,000. So actually, they're holding their value fairly well. If they're starting out $9,600, now that's the MSRP. That doesn't include taxes, titles, registration, dealer fees, dock fees, prep fees, and all that kind of stuff. But that's not too bad. So you ride that motorcycle for a couple years and you're out maybe $2,500, $3,000, a little more once you include all those taxes and titles. Okay. Now we've got the Indian Scout Bobber. Now I chose this motorcycle because price-wise they're comparable to the Sportster, or I'm sorry, the Nightster that Harley offers. So the Indian Scout Bobber 60 at MSRP's for about $10,000. It's got a 60 cubic inch engine, so that's a little bit smaller than the other engines that we're going to talk about, or at least the Honda Rebel. 25.6 inch seat height, 3.4 gallon gas tank, so that's similar to the Rebel. Power numbers, 85 horsepower, 65 foot-pounds of torque. So horsepower is up a little bit compared to the Honda. Torque slightly down. Slightly heavier bike at 536 pounds. Now the weird thing about this bike is it only has a 5-speed transmission. A lot of the other motorcycles on the market today, they're right around a 6-speed, or they are a 6-speed transmission. Now you do have to pay more for ABS and traction control and ride modes. Usually, now this is kind of a cool thing for the Indian Scout Bobber. I checked them a couple, 2, 3 years old. You're paying right around $9,000. And so they didn't lose that much money. Again, it's a pretty solid motorcycle, and it's a very popular motorcycle. Okay, so the whole point is, let's compare this to the Harley-Davidson Nightster. For 2025, MSRP starts right around $10,000. And so right from the start, we're seeing this is a motorcycle that is right around the same price as the other two. It's got 975 cc, otherwise known as a 60 cubic inch engine, so it's about the same size as the Indian. 27.1 inch seat height. But look at these power numbers. The power numbers are 91 horsepower and 72 foot-pounds of torque, and so that's a pretty decent jump over the other two motorcycles. 3.1 gallon tank, 481 pounds, so it's a lighter bike, and this price includes ABS, traction control, your DSCS, that's your dynamic stability control, ride modes, and used a couple years later, you're paying right around $9,000, so the resale is right in line, and you're getting a little bit of extra power, and you're getting all those other features. Now, of course, there are the intangibles, and that is, okay, what do these bikes look like? And motorcycles, let's face it, that the way they look is really something that each individual person has to decide. In my opinion, the Honda Rebel is not a good-looking bike, and if you own one, I'm sorry. I don't mean to offend anybody, but out of the three, it is by far the least appealing-looking bike with that exposed frame and that interesting upward slope that they have towards the gas tank area. I would say the Indian Scout is, and I'm saying this as a Harley guy, it's a better-looking bike than the Nightster. I would not argue that. I would feel a lot cooler, I suppose you would say, if I was on an Indian Scout compared to the Harley Nightster, if that's something that you were really interested in. A Harley Nightster is not a bad looking bike, but it does have this side that's a little bit more gnarly looking on that left-hand side of the motorcycle, so I'll give the looks to Indian. All right, next one, let's go. Let's step it up a little bit. You've gotten out of the entry-level phase and you want something that is going to be a little bit more comfortable. Maybe you can take it on some longer trips. And so now we're looking at something like the Harley-Davidson Heritage Classic. Now, the Indian has something similar, and that is going to be the Indian Chief Limited. Like I already said, Honda, in this comparison, really doesn't have anything to offer here in that class. So let's look at the Indian Chief Limited. It's a bike that starts right around $22,000 MSRP. It does have a 116 cubic inch engine, 4-gallon tank, 26.2 inch on the seat. It is 739 pounds, 92 horsepower, 120 foot-pounds of torque. So those are some nice numbers there. Comes with cruise control, ABS, it's got ride modes, a 4-inch display, and a couple, 2-3 years later, you're probably paying somewhere around $15,000 or so for one that is used. All right, well, let's compare that to the Harley. Again, we've got the Heritage Classic here. It's going to start right around $23,000. It's a 117 cubic inch engine. It's got a larger gas tank, 5 gallons. And to me, that matters, especially as you start getting into bikes that are going to be more of a day trip sort of bike, at least if that's what you want to use it for. 26.3 inch seat height. Power numbers are 98 horsepower, 120 foot-pounds of torque. So a little bit better on the horsepower compared to the Indian. And it's 728 pounds, so a little bit lighter, but nothing, I would say that's negligible. It comes with our tire pressure monitoring system, cruise control, traction with cornering. It comes with slip control, ABS, and a couple years, 2-3 years later, you're paying around $16,000 as well. So you're starting out as $1,000 more, but at least, again, from the research that I did, and it might be different in your area, the resale value is a little bit higher, and so it's actually not going to be any more expensive. Now again, if it's just me, the way they look, I would definitely prefer the Harley, the Heritage Classic over the Indian, but you may have a different opinion, totally understand that. Again, the looks are subjective. All right, let's move on to the baggers. Here we're going to have all three competing once again. We've got Honda Goldwing. That's going to start right around $25,200. It's got a 112 cubic inch 6-cylinder engine, 125 horsepower, 125 foot-pounds of torque, 29.3 inch seat height. It's 802 pounds, 5.5 gallon tank. It's got CarPlay and Android Auto. It's got a pretty cool electric windshield. I do like that. Ride modes. What I really love about the Honda Goldwing is the reverse. I think that's awesome for a bigger, heavier motorcycle. Hill assist, cruise control, digital displays are a little bit lacking on the Honda Goldwing compared to the other two. Resale, you're right around $19,000 to $20,000 a couple, 2-3 years later. All right, so what does the Indian Chieftain bring to the table? It's around $26,500, so it's a little bit more expensive than the Goldwing. 108 cubic inch engine, 122 horsepower, 128 on the torque, foot-pounds of torque, so it's very similar to the Honda Goldwing. We've got a 6-gallon tank. I like that for these big bikes. I think a 6-gallon tank is really important. It also has a power windshield. It's 833 pounds, and so we're getting pretty similar. We're in the neighborhood. It's slightly heavier than the Honda Goldwing. It's got the hill assist, ABS. Rear radar, that's something that that Indian has recently released. I don't really find that to be anything more than a distraction. Look in your rear view mirrors. You should always be doing that when you're slowing down or coming to a stop. I don't need something to tell me that there's a car approaching, but if that's something that you think is important, great. The blind spot monitoring, again, on a motorcycle, it's not like you have A-pillars or anything to turn around and look at that's going to be obstructing your view. So I think it's just another feature that I don't necessarily think is necessary on a motorcycle. It does have cruise control, resales right around $20,000. All right, now we've got the Street Glide. Street Glide, okay, it's more expensive. You've got me on that one. It's $27,750. So it is over $1,000 more than the Indian, and at this point now it's a couple, $2,500 more than the Honda Goldwing. Got the 117 cubic inch engine. It's going to kick out 105 horsepower and 130 foot-pounds of torque. So the horsepower is down, torque is up. 6-gallon tank, 26.4 inch in terms of the seat height. Now, it's got all the tech. It's got the ABS, it's got the tire pressure monitoring system, hill assist, linked brakes, traction control. It's 811 pounds. Resales around $21,000 to $23,000. So once again, you're paying a little bit more. But on the resale side, you're also probably getting a little bit more for your trade-in, or if you're selling it on Facebook Marketplace, which is where I got these numbers. So the moral of the story here is you cannot just look at the initial cost of a motorcycle to determine whether or not it's a more expensive motorcycle, because you have to look at the other part of that. The other part of the equation is, what is the actual cost to own? Now, this is not a video about quality. We haven't talked about it. Oh, the such and such motorcycle is going to last a lot longer. We've had 6 Harley Davidsons, 5, and we put a lot of miles, right? 5 in the last 4 years that we put a lot of miles on. We really haven't had any issues. So my buddies all ride Harleys. They're not having issues. So again, I know that's anecdotal, but at least in terms of quality, they've been really good for us. I'm not saying that Indian and Honda aren't. Honda's got an outstanding reputation. Indian, I'm not as familiar with their quality and how it is. I mean, if you ride an Indian and you've had no problems, share that in the comments section. We'd love to hear it. Now, there are some other things to consider. I mentioned long-term quality. That's not the subject of this video, but initial quality, when you look at the motorcycles stacked up one another, there are some things that stand out. And I've done demo days for Indian. I've rode a lot of their motorcycles. I've ridden Hondas before in the past, like I said. But when you look at Harley Davidson, you look at their paint quality, you look at the quality of their chrome, you look at the engineering, you look at the actual quality of the motorcycle. And I think even if there was a slight initial premium to pay for Harley motorcycles, I'm willing to pay that. Not only that, but you look at the dealer networks. I know it's not cool to say on the internet sometimes, like, oh my gosh, yeah, I do, we do. We like going when we're traveling, especially on a motorcycle, stopping at the different dealers, collecting our little coins, being part of hog groups that actually has large riding groups. Those are all these incidental things that are a benefit to owning a Harley motorcycle compared to some of the other ones. You walk into the dealers, they put time and effort, they make a nice atmosphere. You can go in there and get a free bottle of water when you're riding around on your motorcycle. There's a lot of other smaller things that happen on the Harley side that don't really happen in other motorcycles, the community, that kind of thing. That's something that's important to us. It may not be important to you. You might be someone who likes to ride on your own and just get out and go. Totally understand that. But it's something to consider. Again, the whole point of this video is for people who say that, oh, Harleys are so much more expensive than other motorcycles, stop. Are you comparing the motorcycle that Harley is producing to the motorcycles that other manufacturers are producing in the same class? Yeah, you can certainly say, oh, I've got an MT-09 and it's way less expensive than a Harley Heritage or a Harley Street Glide. Well, it's not the same motorcycle, as I said earlier in the video. They're not even close. It costs money to put chrome on a motorcycle that's high quality. It costs money to put lots and lots of layers of paint and to have things where you don't have wires exposed and frame parts exposed, because a lot of people, especially Harley riders, don't want to look at that as an eyesore. So that's, again, if you don't mind that, that's okay. But for people who ride Harleys, that is something that we don't really want to see, and that takes costs. There's manufacturing costs available or that are a part of that as well. By the way, if you want to see a video on how to save money buying a motorcycle, regardless of what type it is, check out that video in the upper right-hand corner. And if you're looking for bikes that are just something that you want to start out on, especially if you're interested in Harley, check out that video in the lower right-hand corner. Would love to hear from you in the comments section below. What do you think? What kind of motorcycle do you ride? Do you think it's a good value? Really appreciate you being here. We'll see you next week.